My family disowned me, believing my ex-girlfriend's false cheating accusations, and didn't even bother to apologize when the truth came out. First story. My family disowned me after believing my ex-girlfriend's false accusations of cheating. They didn't even bother to apologize when the truth came out. Now, 4 years later, they expect me to show up at my sister's wedding to save face. I was sitting on the couch after work, still in my rumpled dress shirt and tie, scrolling through emails on my laptop, when a name I hadn't seen in years stopped me dead in my tracks. Lisa, my sister. The subject line of her email simply read, "Come to my wedding." I sat there staring at the screen, my hands frozen over the keyboard. I wasn't sure why she was emailing me now after all this time. It had been years since we'd spoken, years of silence that had stretched like an uncrossable chasm between us. The last time I'd heard her voice, it was screaming insults at me over the phone. I still remembered every word she'd said, words meant to wound, words that made it clear she believed Claire's lies and wanted nothing more to do with me. After that call, she cut me off entirely, and the rest of my family followed her lead. Eventually, I mustered the nerve to open the email. It was brief, painfully so, and entirely devoid of the acknowledgement or remorse I had once naively hoped for. Lisa wrote that she was getting married in a couple of months and wanted me there. No explanation, no apology, no recognition of what had happened between us. She added a line about how family is family and how much it would mean to her if I came, as if those words were some kind of magic spell meant to erase the past. She even attached the invitation, a glittery PDF file with her and her fiancé's smiling faces, as if my attendance was already a given. I closed the email without replying. To make sense of all this, I need to take you back to where it all began. 4 years ago, I was in a long-term relationship with Claire. We had been together for 3 years, and while the first year felt like a honeymoon, things started unraveling during the second. By the third year, the cracks were impossible to ignore. Claire had this uncanny ability to twist every disagreement into a personal attack against her. If I so much as mentioned I didn't like a particular restaurant or movie she chose, it became a conversation about how I didn't value her or thought she was inferior. I spent more and more time walking on eggshells, desperately trying to avoid triggering another argument. When I finally worked up the courage to suggest we break up, Claire's reaction was intense. She broke down sobbing, telling me she couldn't imagine her life without me and promising to change. I was emotionally drained, and in a moment of weakness, I agreed to give our relationship one more chance. That was my first mistake. A few months later, things took a sharp turn. One evening, out of nowhere, Lisa messaged me. She sent screenshots Claire had shown her, messages that allegedly proved I was cheating. According to the texts, I had been calling some other woman babe and making plans to meet up. I was stunned. I hadn't sent those messages. I didn't even recognize the phone number Claire claimed belonged to this mystery woman. I tried to explain this to Lisa, but she refused to listen. She called me a liar, accused me of betraying Claire, and said she was disgusted to call me her brother. The words cut deeper than I expected, but it didn't stop there. Claire, emboldened by Lisa's outrage, took the same screenshots to my parents. They called me, livid, demanding to know how I could stoop so low. When I tried to tell them the messages were fake, my dad interrupted me saying, "Claire wouldn't make something like this up." That sentence was the nail in the coffin. Within a week, my family had turned against me completely. They called me every name under the sun: cheater, manipulator, liar. My mom said I had embarrassed the family, and my dad told me not to bother showing up at their house anymore. Even extended relatives got involved. My aunt, who had always been vocal on social media, posted a rant about me on Facebook, calling me the black sheep of the family and saying I deserved everything coming to me. I was utterly alone. My girlfriend was gone, my family had disowned me, and even distant relatives were joining in the chorus of condemnation. The humiliation and isolation were suffocating. I hit rock bottom, and it took the unwavering support of 2 people, Jake, my best friend since childhood, and Sophie, the woman I eventually began dating years later, to pull me back from the edge. Sophie, in particular, was instrumental in helping me rebuild my life, but the scars from that time never fully healed. Here's the kicker. About a year after everything fell apart, Lisa found out the truth. One of her friends, who had been close to Claire, came forward with undeniable proof that Claire had fabricated the entire story. She had faked the texts, invented the affair, and manipulated my family into turning against me. The realization hit Lisa like a freight train. She reached out to me, but by then, the damage was done. And now, 4 years later, she wants me to show up at her wedding, as if none of it ever happened. Apparently, Claire had been feeling insecure and convinced herself that I might be on the verge of breaking up with her. So, in some twisted logic, she decided to get ahead of it by fabricating a story that I had been cheating on her. She even admitted to photoshopping text messages as evidence to support her lie. When Lisa, my sister, found out the truth, she called me in tears. She was crying so much it was hard to understand her at first. But eventually, she started apologizing over and over, saying she couldn't believe how she had been so quick to side with Claire. Lisa admitted that she didn't know how she could have believed Claire's story over mine. She told me our parents felt terrible too, but were too ashamed or too unsure of how to approach me after everything that had happened. To be honest, by that point, it didn't matter anymore. I told Lisa flat out that it was too little, too late. The damage was done, and I had already made my decision. I cut them all out of my life. There wasn't any dramatic confrontation or explosive fight. It was just me deciding that I deserved better than to be surrounded by people who wouldn't stand up for me when it really mattered. So now, here we are, 4 years down the line, and suddenly Lisa decides to reach out because she's getting married. I can't figure out if it's because she feels genuinely guilty and wants to make amends, or if she just doesn't want to deal with explaining to her wedding guests why her brother isn't there. Either way, I'm not interested. They made their choice back then, and now I've made mine. Comment 1. Wait, so your family never reached out at all after they found out Claire lied? Not even an apology from your parents? How did they expect you to just move on without acknowledging what they did? OP. Response. Not a single apology, not one. And when I say not one, I mean not even a direct acknowledgement of what they did. Lisa was the only one who called me after everything came out, and even that felt more like an attempt to do damage control than an actual apology. She said our parents felt awful about the situation but didn't know how to approach me. Honestly, that made me even angrier. If they felt any ounce of regret, they could have picked up the phone themselves or even written me a letter. But no. Instead, they left Lisa to clean up their mess and went on pretending like nothing happened. From where I'm sitting, it seems like they just wanted to sweep the whole thing under the rug and hope that time would magically fix everything. I think they assumed that eventually I'd come crawling back, but here's the spoiler. I'm not crawling anywhere.
Comment
2. Okay, but don't you think it's kind of petty to hold this grudge for so long? People make mistakes, and maybe they just didn't know how to fix things back then. Isn't a wedding a good opportunity to mend fences? OP. Response. I don't think it's petty to protect myself from people who've already shown me that they won't have my back when it truly matters. If this were just a mistake and they had owned up to it, maybe we'd be having a different conversation. But they didn't. They believed Claire without even giving me a chance to explain. And then they went even further by cutting me off completely and trashing my name to the rest of the family. It's not like I sit around being angry all day or holding on to this out of spite. I've moved on with my life, but that doesn't mean I'm going to open the door for them to hurt me again. Lisa reaching out now feels more like she's trying to ease her own guilt than actually making amends. Let's be real. If this wedding weren't happening, do you think they'd suddenly care about reconnecting with me? I highly doubt it. Comment 3. I don't understand why your family was so quick to take Claire's side. Did she have some weird hold on them? Or is there more to the story with your parents? Why were they so ready to cut you off? OP. Response. Yeah, I've asked myself that question a lot over the years. Looking back, I think it was a combination of things. Claire had always been really close with my family, especially my mom and Lisa. My mom used to gush about how Claire was the perfect girl for me, and Lisa practically idolized her, treating her like the older sister she never had. So, when Claire came to them with her so-called proof that I had cheated, they didn't even think to question it. In their eyes, Claire could do no wrong. On top of that, I've always had a rocky relationship with my dad. He's the kind of person who sees the world in very black and white terms. Once he decides someone is the bad guy, that's it. You're done. I think he saw this situation as an opportunity to play the role of moral authority. Since Claire had what looked like solid evidence, it was easy for him to write me off entirely. It's also worth mentioning that I've never been as close with my family as Lisa is. Lisa has always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I was more of an afterthought. So, when everything went down, I think it was easier for them to side with Claire and Lisa and just cut me out without a second thought. I do not think my family ever hated me. That would be too harsh a term for what our relationship became. But I also do not think they valued me enough to stand by me when everything fell apart. It is a bitter realization, but one that has shaped the way I view them now. If I'm being completely honest, I suspect their sudden interest in reaching out to me has less to do with missing me and more to do with appearances. Lisa's wedding is approaching, and having her only brother absent from the guest list probably raises questions they would rather not answer. It feels like they are trying to save face, not reconnect. After my initial post, I assumed the situation would settle itself if I ignored Lisa's email. I figured they would take the hint and move on, but as usual, I underestimated their persistence. My family is not known for letting things go, especially when they feel like they are losing control of the narrative. What began as a single ignored invitation quickly spiraled into an onslaught of calls, guilt-tripping messages, and unexpected outreach from relatives I had not heard from in years. It all started with a call from my father. Seeing his name flash on my phone screen was surreal. We had not spoken in 4 years, not since everything unraveled with Claire, and he had made no effort to contact me after the truth about her came out. For him to suddenly reach out now could only mean one thing: Lisa's wedding. Curiosity got the better of me, so I picked up. His tone was clipped, almost impatient, and he wasted no time getting to the point. Lisa had told him I was not planning to attend the wedding, and he wanted me to reconsider. He did not ask how I was doing or offer any pleasantries. His focus was entirely on what he needed from me. He launched into a speech about family unity, urging me to see this as an opportunity to move forward. His words were rehearsed, as if he had practiced them beforehand. I stayed quiet, letting him speak, but it became obvious that he was not interested in addressing the past. When I finally interrupted, I told him plainly that I did not see the point in attending. I reminded him of how they had turned their backs on me when Claire made her accusations, choosing to believe her lies without question. When the truth came out, there was no apology, no acknowledgement of the damage they had done. His response was infuriating in its dismissiveness. Mistakes were made, and everyone was hurt by what happened. But it's time to move on. Hearing those words was like being slapped across the face. To him, years of betrayal, alienation, and pain were nothing more than mistakes. I explained that trust is not something that can be rebuilt on a whim. It takes accountability, effort, and sincerity, none of which I had seen from them. He accused me of being stubborn, framing my decision as some petty grudge. At that point, the conversation was going in circles, so I ended it on my terms. Before hanging up, I mentioned that I was now engaged to an amazing woman named Sophie, and that we were building a life together. His silence was deafening. He did not congratulate me, did not ask about Sophie. He said nothing. After a pause, I said, "I guess I'm doing just fine without the family," and ended the call. Not long after, Lisa sent another email. This one was drenched in emotion, clearly designed to guilt me into compliance. She accused me of being cruel and selfish, claiming I was punishing the entire family over one mistake. She painted her wedding as a chance for a fresh start, insisting that my absence would ruin her day. Her arguments were predictable, centering on the same shallow reasoning I had come to expect from her. She emphasized appearances, stressing how people would notice if I was not there. What truly enraged me was when she wrote, "Even Claire admitted she was wrong. Why can't you move on?" That line felt like a punch to the gut. Claire's so-called confession had been forced, not heartfelt. She only admitted her lies when she was caught, and she never apologized to me. Not genuinely, at least. Lisa acting as though Claire's coerced admission should erase years of pain was insulting beyond belief. A few days later, my mother called. Her approach was softer but no less manipulative. She opened with feigned confusion, asking why I was being so stubborn and refusing to reconcile. Her tone was tinged with sadness, but her words carried the same dismissive undertones as my father's. The conversation blurred into a familiar script, one I had heard too many times before. They wanted me back, but only on their terms, without acknowledgement, without accountability, and without any real effort to make amends. Then she started bringing up old memories from my childhood, clearly trying to play on my emotions and pull at my heartstrings. She said things like, "We have all made mistakes, but family is family," as if that somehow erased the pain and betrayal or excused what they had done to me. She even tried to flip the narrative, painting themselves as the victims. According to her, they had no idea how to approach me after everything that had happened, as if their inaction and silence were somehow justified. I stayed calm and responded with the same words I had told my dad. Trust is not something that magically reappears after being broken. It needs effort and accountability to rebuild. I reminded her that they had years to apologize, years to try and make things right, and yet they chose not to. Now, at Lisa's wedding, they suddenly cared. It was not about fixing the relationship, it was about avoiding public embarrassment. When I said this, her demeanor shifted. She started crying, telling me that I was breaking her heart and that all she wanted was for us to be a family again. I told her plainly that I was no longer interested in rebuilding something they had been so quick and careless to throw away in the first place. At that point, the situation spiraled even further. Somehow, word spread to the rest of the family, and before I knew it, my phone was flooded with messages. Cousins, aunts, and even some family friends were chiming in, trying to tell me what I should do. Many of them insisted that I needed to let go of the past and move on. Some were outright hostile, calling me selfish and accusing me of ruining Lisa's special day. Others tried to minimize what had happened, saying things like, "It has been years. Are you not over it yet?" It was infuriating. None of them seemed to care about what I had gone through or how deeply their betrayal had hurt me. To them, it was all about keeping up appearances. They just wanted me to put on a smile and play along so the family could maintain their picture-perfect facade. The only person who seemed to understand was my uncle, my mom's brother. He called me privately and said he did not blame me for staying away. He shared that he had tried, on multiple occasions, to talk to my parents about how they had handled things with Claire, but they had refused to acknowledge their mistakes or take any accountability. That call meant the world to me. It was like a breath of fresh air amidst the chaos. But even his support could not undo the overwhelming pressure I was feeling from the rest of the family. One particularly nasty text from a cousin pushed me to my limit. I decided that I had had enough. I sat down, composed one final message, and sent it to Lisa. In it, I laid everything out in clear terms. I told her I would not be coming to her wedding and that I did not want to hear from her, or anyone else in the family, about it again. I explained that their betrayal had caused irreparable damage to our relationship, and that their recent attempts to guilt me into attending only served as a reminder of why I could not trust them. I made it clear that I was not angry anymore, but I also saw no point in trying to rebuild something with people who had already shown me how little they valued me. I wished her well and ended the conversation there. Since then, there has been an eerie silence. I'm not sure if they have finally accepted my decision, or if they are just regrouping for another attempt at dragging me back into their drama. Either way, I feel confident in where I stand. For those who wonder why I did not try harder to reconcile, the answer is simple. They never tried hard enough either. They made their choices back then, and now I am making mine. I have moved on with my life, and I am happier for it. I'm engaged to an incredible woman who loves me for who I am. My career is thriving, and I am surrounded by people who genuinely care about me and my well-being. Honestly, I do not feel like I am missing out on anything by cutting ties with my family. To everyone who supported me in the original post, thank you. Your encouragement gave me the strength to stand my ground and prioritize my happiness over their expectations. Second story. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation where my sister's boyfriend would be dictating how I should live my life. Yet, here we are. To set the stage, I am a 22-year-old woman, the youngest of 4 sisters. My oldest sister, who is 28, has 4 kids and loves her life as a stay-at-home mom. I've always encouraged her to follow her heart and live the life she wants because it's her choice, and she's genuinely happy. But here's the thing. Just because that lifestyle works for her doesn't mean it's for everyone, and that includes me. I have no desire to have children right now, and I'm not even sure I want them at all in the future. My 2 other sisters, both older than me, feel the same way. We're independent, career-focused, and enjoy our autonomy. This is important context for what comes next. Now, my oldest sister's boyfriend, a 27-year-old man, has taken it upon himself to give me unsolicited life advice, and it's not the helpful kind. It all started when he casually asked me when I plan to settle down. He even suggested introducing me to one of his friends, a 25-year-old man who supposedly dreams of a traditional life where his wife stays at home and raises kids while he provides. I politely declined, explaining that I wasn't interested in dating anyone this year. Instead of leaving it at that, he pressed me for reasons. Reluctantly, I shared that my last relationship ended badly. My ex-boyfriend cheated on me 6 months into our 3-year relationship, leaving me with major trust issues. It was a painful breakup in 2023, and I'm still not ready to jump back into the dating pool. His response? "It's been long enough. You should start dating again." I told him flat out that my personal life wasn't any of his business, and thankfully he dropped it, for the moment. But 2 days ago, the topic came up again. He asked if I wanted to be a stay-at-home wife and mother. I told him quite honestly that I didn't. Marriage and kids are not priorities for me, and I'm not even sure if they ever will be. This seemed to strike a nerve. He became defensive, pointing out that his mother was a stay-at-home mom, as if that fact alone should convince me to reconsider. I reassured him that I respect stay-at-home moms, including his mother and my sister, but I don't want to depend on a man for my livelihood. That's when things really started to escalate. He argued that not all men are the same. I agreed, but countered with the obvious. Not all women are the same either. He then brought up my sister, saying she wants to be a stay-at-home wife and mother, as if her choices should somehow dictate mine. I congratulated him on finding someone who shared his values, but reiterated, for what felt like the 100th time, that I wasn't interested in that lifestyle. He didn't take it well. To make matters worse, he overheard me talking about my plans to get an intrauterine device, IUD, and completely lost it. He accused me of ruining God's plan for me to become a mother someday. I reminded him quite bluntly that my reproductive choices were none of his concern. That's when he told me to leave his house, so I did. Thankfully, my 2 other older sisters have my back. They reminded me that our sister's boyfriend has no right to interfere in my life choices. They also pointed out the obvious. If I choose to remain independent and never rely on anyone else, that's entirely up to me. The drama didn't stop there. At one point, her boyfriend had the audacity to say I was going to hell for being bisexual. That was the last straw. I shot back that, by his logic, my sister, his girlfriend, must be going to hell too, since she's also bisexual. And yes, he knows about it. The hypocrisy was almost laughable, but it only made him angrier. Now, their mutual friends are bombarding me with messages, calling me selfish and claiming that I should respect God's body by becoming a mother sooner rather than later. Apparently, my personal choices are everyone's business now. So, here I am wondering, am I the bad guy for standing up to my sister's boyfriend and refusing to apologize for not wanting the same life he envisions for me? Somehow, I don't think so. Edit to clarify, I mentioned this in a few comments, but it seems worth repeating for those confused about the dynamics here. 3 out of my sister's 4 children aren't even his. She has a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and she's currently expecting her 4th child. None of this, of course, stops her boyfriend from acting like he's the authority on everyone's lives. Edit 2. A question I keep getting is why I was talking about getting an intrauterine device, IUD, with my sister's boyfriend. To clarify, I wasn't. My 3 sisters and I were having a conversation at his house while he wasn't home. At some point, I mentioned I was considering getting an IUD, and wouldn't you know it, he walked in right then. That's when he decided to inject himself into the conversation uninvited. He immediately made some comment along the lines of, "It's God's body, not your body." And that's when things escalated. My other two sisters backed me up as we tried to reason with him, but he raised his voice, which pushed me to raise mine. Eventually we left because I despise conflict and didn't see the point of arguing with someone so out of line. Naturally, people have shared their thoughts. One commenter said, "This guy sounds like a creep. Who is he to dictate what you do with your life, your career, and your body? I hope your sister sees the light and supports you instead of him." Unfortunately, that's not the case. My sister fully supports him and even asked me to apologize to keep the peace. But I've reached my breaking point. I'm done sacrificing my peace to maintain theirs. This guy's beliefs go beyond just the IUD issue. He supports a national abortion ban, even in cases of sexual assault or incest, which is absolutely terrifying. My sister is on board with his views, and honestly, it's deeply unsettling to be around them. His opinions on traditional gender roles and stay-at-home mothers are outdated and oppressive, and I refuse to let him impose those ideas on me. As one commenter aptly put it, people are only traditional when it's convenient for them. This is especially ironic because he isn't even married to my sister, the mother of his child. Update 2 days later. I knew I was going to cut contact with my sister's boyfriend. His presence makes me feel unsafe, and I decided to put my well-being first. I called my sister to explain my decision, hoping she would understand, but she was furious. She accused me of overreacting and insisted I owed him an apology. During our call, he overheard the conversation and decided to butt in again. He demanded answers to two absurd questions: why I don't want to be a stay-at-home mom, and why I refuse to date his friend Mary. I told him frankly that it was none of his business, and he needed to stay in his lane. He didn't like my response and warned me that if I didn't stop overreacting, I'd lose access to my niece and nephews. That hit hard. But ultimately, I told him that for the sake of my mental health, I was done speaking to him. My sister coldly replied, "Okay, you made your choice, and we'll make ours." Just like that, I went no contact with both of them. Later, I found out that my dad had heard about what happened. That morning, after I hung up, he confronted my sister's boyfriend, Josh. He told Josh to back off and declared, "My daughter is not for sale." Apparently, the argument escalated into a fistfight, and according to my dad, he won. While I'm not sure if that part is true, he did call me afterward to apologize for everything. He even asked me why I didn't want to be a stay-at-home mom, and I opened up about how his abusive behavior toward my stepmother had influenced my decision. He was shocked and admitted he never realized the impact his actions had on me. He apologized again, which I appreciated, but it doesn't erase the past. I'll always remember the moment I saw him choking my stepmother, screaming at him to stop. He let her go, but he never apologized back then. In the end, I decided to cut ties with my sister and her boyfriend for good. It's heartbreaking because I love my niece and nephews, but my mental and physical health have to come first. One more thing. In my original post, a lot of people suggested I ask him when he plans to marry my sister, since he's so concerned with living in God's plan. So I did. His response? "That's none of your business." I couldn't help but laugh as I shot back, "Then it's none of your business to comment on what I do with my body or who I choose to date." He exploded into a tirade of insults, but I didn't care. It felt good to finally stand up for myself. Third story. I have backed myself into a corner, and I do not even know where to start. My life feels like it is crumbling before my eyes, and I have no one left to turn to. Writing this out feels like my last option, maybe to gain some clarity, or maybe just to let it all out. For context, I have been in a relationship with my boyfriend Ethan for 3 years. He is 28 years old and currently in his 3rd year of residency, specializing in internal medicine. If you know anything about medical residencies, you probably understand how brutal they can be. Ethan works an insane number of hours, sometimes up to 80 hours a week, and the pressure he is under is relentless. He is constantly exhausted, constantly stressed, but he keeps pushing through because he believes in building a future for the both of us. I deeply admire and appreciate how hard he works, but at the same time, his grueling schedule has left me feeling isolated. We live together, but most days it feels like I am on my own. On top of the emotional distance, financial struggles have always been a shadow hanging over us. Ethan's salary as a resident is modest at best, and most of it gets eaten up by rent, bills, and the mountain of student loans he is working to pay off. Meanwhile, I work as a waitress, pulling double shifts whenever I can, but even then, I was barely making enough to cover my share of the bills. There were weeks when I did not know how I would afford groceries, gas, or even the small luxuries like buying a cup of coffee without feeling guilty. Saving for my own future felt like a distant dream, an impossible goal. That is when I started exploring other options. About a year ago, I made the decision to create an OnlyFans account. At first, I justified it as a simple way to make extra cash, something easy and harmless. In the beginning, I kept it low-key. I did not even show my face, just posted some suggestive pictures. To my surprise, things took off quickly. The requests for custom content started rolling in, and the money being offered was impossible to ignore. Before I knew it, I was making more in a week on OnlyFans than I was making in an entire month at the restaurant. But that was not the end of it. A few subscribers reached out with offers for in-person meetings. The amounts they were offering were staggering, so much so that it felt impossible to turn them down. I told myself I would be smart about it. I set boundaries, thoroughly vetted every client, and took every precaution to ensure my safety. And honestly, I stuck to those rules. I have never done anything I was uncomfortable with, and I have always felt in control of the situation. To me, it was just another form of work. A transaction, nothing more, nothing less. Here's the thing. I have never felt guilty about it. I know it might sound cold, but in my mind, this is not cheating. I love Ethan, I really do. My feelings for him and my commitment to our relationship have not wavered. What I do on the side is purely business. It is not emotional, and it does not change how I feel about him or the life we are building together. But I also know Ethan would never see it that way. Ethan has always been very traditional when it comes to relationships. He does not explicitly say it often, but his views come through in subtle ways during conversations. For example, a few months ago, one of his close friends confided in him that he and his girlfriend were opening up their relationship. Ethan was furious. He could not wrap his head around it and kept saying how weak and disrespectful it was. He even went as far as to suggest that he might need to reconsider his friendship with the guy because he could not respect someone who would agree to something like that. His reaction shocked me. I tried to defend his friend, pointing out that it was not really fair to judge someone else's choices so harshly, but Ethan would not hear it. He was firm in his beliefs, and it became clear that loyalty and commitment, at least in the way he defines them, are non-negotiable for him. That conversation has stuck with me ever since. It made me realize just how deeply ingrained his values are, and it became painfully clear that there is no way he would ever accept what I have been doing. At one point, I thought about confessing to him during that argument. The words were on the tip of my tongue, but I panicked. If he was this upset about something that did not even involve him directly, how could I expect him to react to my situation? I convinced myself to keep quiet, and I have been carrying that secret ever since. So, I backpedaled to Jen and decided to keep it to myself. That does not mean it has been easy. Hiding the truth has been exhausting, and the money I have been making has not gone unnoticed. Ethan has asked me more than once how I have been able to afford certain things lately. Groceries, date nights where I treat him, or even small luxuries for myself like new clothes or a piece of jewelry I would not have splurged on before. Each time, I have lied to him, telling him that my family has been helping me out financially. It seemed like the most plausible explanation since my parents have always been generous and supportive. He never pressed too hard because it made sense, but every time he praised me for being so responsible with money, the guilt crushed me a little more. I felt like the biggest fraud, carrying this secret that has begun to eat away at me. The guilt finally got to be too much, so I confided in Megan, my best friend. We have been close since our college days, and she has always been my go-to person for advice. Megan has a reputation for being open-minded and progressive, always advocating for women making their own choices and living authentically. I assumed she would understand my situation, maybe even support me. So I laid it all out for her. How I started an OnlyFans account, how it has helped me stay afloat financially during tough times, and how I have been keeping it from Ethan because I know he would not understand. I thought she would see my perspective, but her reaction was not at all what I expected. Megan was furious. She accused me of being deceitful and selfish, claiming that I was betraying Ethan by not telling him the truth. She told me that he deserved to know and implied that I was leading him on while building a secret life behind his back. I tried to explain my reasoning, that it is my body and my choice, and that this decision does not diminish how much I love Ethan. But Megan would not hear it. She said I was being delusional if I thought this would not eventually blow up in my face. Then she dropped the bombshell. She could not continue being friends with someone she considered dishonest. That was 2 days ago, and I have not heard from her since. Now, I am terrified. Megan is not usually one to stir up drama, but I can imagine her telling Ethan if she truly believes it is the right thing to do. And even if she does not, there is still the very real possibility that someone else could find out. Ethan is not particularly active online, but all it would take is one of his friends, co-workers, or even a random acquaintance stumbling across my profile. It feels like everything I have worked to protect is hanging by a thread. I know I messed up. I know I should have been honest with Ethan from the beginning, but now I feel completely trapped. If I tell him now, I risk losing him entirely, no question. But if I stay quiet, there is always the chance that he finds out on his own, which would undoubtedly be even worse. I came here seeking advice, not to be judged or torn apart. What should I do? Should I come clean now and face the potential fallout, or should I continue to keep this part of my life private and hope for the best? Am I really as horrible as Megan made me feel, or do I have the right to keep this to myself? The responses have been brutal. One common sentiment sticks in my mind. Jesus Christ. You are out here trying to justify lying to a man who is breaking his back to build a future for the both of you while you are sneaking around doing something you know he would never be okay with. Stop with the my body, my choice justification. This is not about that. This is about you lying, deceiving, and betraying the trust of someone who sees you as his partner. Imagine if the roles were reversed. If he were doing something behind your back that he knew would destroy the relationship, you would be here sobbing about betrayal. Honestly, you do not deserve this guy. He is out there working himself to the bone to make sure you have a stable life, and you are sneaking around doing sex work, hoping no one finds out. Spoiler alert, people always find out. You are living on borrowed time, and when this blows up, and it will, he is going to leave you so fast, your head will spin. Do him a favor and tell him now so he can move on with someone who actually respects him. Another comment was equally harsh but hit closer to home. Girl, you are acting like the main character in some tragic love story, but newsflash, you are not. You are the villain here. You are trying to justify your actions as if they are harmless, but the second Megan refused to enable your fantasy, you turned defensive. Let me spell it out for you. You are lying to someone who has devoted himself to being a good partner and building a future with you. You know this secret would crush him. It is not about your body or your choices. It is about trust. You already know what you need to do. The question is whether you have the courage to do it. Reading these responses has left me feeling exposed and ashamed, but also unsure of how to move forward. What is the right thing to do when every option feels like a dead end? Another comment, instead of facing the consequences of your actions like a mature, responsible adult, you are clinging to the hope that you can continue lying and skating by without anyone noticing. But let's confront reality for a moment. The truth has a way of coming out, no matter how well you think you've hidden it. Maybe it will come from your former best friend Megan, or perhaps one of his co-workers will stumble across something, or even some random person online will piece everything together. However it happens, when the truth finally hits Ethan, it's going to devastate him. And honestly, it should. He would be absolutely justified in walking away from you. Why? Because your actions show a blatant lack of respect. Not just for him, not just for your relationship, but for yourself as well. The fact that you're holding on to this delusion that everything is fine as long as he doesn't find out is proof enough of how warped your perspective has become. The reality is this: it's time to stop. Tell him the truth. Break up with him. Then take a long, hard look in the mirror and start working on yourself. Right now, you are the problem. Not him, not the circumstances, not anyone else. Let me begin by saying this. Reddit can be a brutal, unforgiving place. I came here seeking advice, hoping for some clarity in the mess I created. While a few kind and thoughtful individuals did offer genuinely helpful advice, thank you to those people, the majority of you seemed more interested in tearing me apart than providing constructive feedback. I understand that I made mistakes, but the level of hostility was overwhelming. If calling me out gave you the sense of superiority or validation you were looking for, then congratulations. I hope it was worth it. For those who genuinely cared enough to provide advice, this update is for you. I took the advice I received to heart and sat Ethan down to tell him the truth. It wasn't easy, and I knew it was going to hurt him. But I also knew that continuing to lie was only making things worse. I told him everything. About the OnlyFans account, the escorting, how long I had been doing it, all of it. At first, he didn't react at all. He just sat there staring at me like he couldn't comprehend what he was hearing. When I finished, he didn't yell or lash out. He didn't accuse me of anything. He didn't say anything at all. After what felt like an eternity, he got up and locked himself in the bedroom. I could hear him crying through the door, and it absolutely broke me. I knew in that moment there was no salvaging our relationship. Hours later, he finally came out. His face was red, his eyes swollen, and his expression one of pure devastation. He didn't look at me as he quietly asked, "Is this some kind of prank?" When I assured him it wasn't, that this was real, and that I was telling him the truth because he deserved to know, he just shook his head. After another long pause, he simply said, "I can't do this. I'm breaking up with you." That was it. No shouting, no slamming doors, no dramatic scenes. He grabbed his keys and left. I assume he went back to the hospital, where he spends most of his time, but I can't say for sure. Later that night, he texted me and told me he wanted me to move out of our apartment as soon as possible. So, here we are. It's over. I won't pretend I'm not heartbroken because I am. Ethan was an incredible partner, kind, supportive, and everything I could have wanted in a boyfriend. I will always love him for the time we shared. But I also know that the moment I started keeping secrets, our relationship was doomed. He deserves someone who aligns with his values and someone who will be completely honest with him. As for me, I'm not sure if I'll ever be in another serious relationship. If I am, I know now that honesty has to be at the core of it. Keeping secrets, no matter how well-intentioned or self-justified, only leads to pain and betrayal. For those of you who feel vindicated that I got what I deserved, congratulations again. Enjoy your moment of triumph. As for me, I'm moving forward. I'm trying to learn from my mistakes and become a better person. That's all anyone can do, really. Comments. Comment 1. Oh, poor you. It's everyone else's fault that Reddit didn't give you the validation you were hoping for, right? The truth is, you lied to your boyfriend for over a year, betrayed his trust, and wasted his time. Yet somehow, we're the villains for pointing out your selfish and deceitful behavior. Take some responsibility for your actions. You didn't just betray Ethan, you betrayed yourself by thinking you could justify this mess. Ethan is an absolute legend for walking away. Most people wouldn't have been able to handle that level of betrayal with the calmness he showed. You didn't deserve him, plain and simple. He deserves someone honest, not someone hiding behind excuses. So stop acting like a victim. Ethan is the victim here, not you. Good for him for walking away from this disaster.